Okay, hello, good evening and welcome. We are tonight looking at Affinity Photo. After a couple of sessions dedicated to the iPad version, we are tonight looking at the Mac version. But before we get going, who on earth am I? I'm Elaine Giles, a long-time trainer, podcast host, and a geek. Oh, I love my software, particularly my design software, and particularly my Serif Affinity software. So, as I've said, we have recently done 2 sessions dedicated to Affinity Photo for iPad. And while I was doing those sessions, people requested that I use the same demos, but show them in the desktop version. Either they haven't got the iPad version, they prefer to use the desktop version, or they're waiting to acquire an iPad that will run Affinity Photo. And they'd like to see how to do the tasks we did on the iPad on the Mac. So that's what tonight's about. Just so you're aware, when Affinity Photo first came out, I did a session, an hour's worth of live training on Affinity Photo. That was back in September 2015, and the video is available on YouTube. What I'm in the process of doing is putting all of my Affinity Photo tutorials on that page, elainegiles.co.uk/affinity-photo. At the moment, it's linking back to the first one for the iPad. But by the end of the week, and seeing as though today's Thursday, I'll have to get on with it, that will have links to all of the videos. So you can use that as a jump-off point to go and see all of the demos that I've done of Affinity. And talking of demos, let's actually go in and demonstrate this one. These demos are all from the first session that we did dedicated to the iPad. The good news is I will be covering the second set of demonstrations from the second session dedicated to the iPad next week. But tonight I'm replicating those first ones. So let's go in and have a look at it. Right, so here is Affinity Photo on the desktop. It might look a little bit cramped. What I've had to do is set my screen resolution down to a little bit less than I would normally use, but you can actually see all of the tools. So there's nothing actually missing. It just looks a little bit snug. Right, so first of all, let me go and get my data. Where's my data disappeared to? I do love it when my data disappears. I will go and open it from in here. That's a good way to go, isn't it? But I've got some recent ones, but I'll go and open it. And it is actually in the right place. Oh, wonders will never cease. Right, the first thing that we looked at was processing raw images. Now, the images that I've got here, there's a few CR2 images, which is Canon RAW files. These are from a 30D. They're around the 10, 11 years old mark, as you can see from the file names there. I've also got a few DNGs, which are the digital negative formats, Adobe format. They started life as Canon RAW files and they got processed. But I'm going to start off with this one. I will be using a couple of others of these raw files, but this was the one that we did on the iPad. So this is the one that I'm going to start with. Right, first thing to be aware of when you are using Affinity Photo is that Affinity has 5 different modes, which it calls personas. These are available from the top left-hand corner of the screen. So just to show you those up there so you are aware of them. You have Photo Persona. You have a Liquify Persona. This one that you're looking at right now is the Develop Persona. It automatically takes you into Develop Persona when you open a raw image. You have 2 other personas, the Tone Mapping Persona and the Export Persona. So that's personas. We are now in the Develop Persona. The reason that you have these personas is if you think of them as toolkits, they provide you with the dedicated tools that you are likely to need to do what it is you're attempting to do. So either use Liquify tools, develop a raw image, do tone mapping, export your files. So it not only does it highlight for you the tools that will be most useful, but it also takes away the tools that would be irrelevant when you're working in Affinity. Now that can be quite I'd say upsetting. It upset me the first time I saw them because I thought, whoa, where are my tools gone? I was used to seeing those tools at all times. But actually, if you just go with the flow, just go with it, it does make complete sense and it actually makes your job a lot easier. You're not distracted by tools that you can't actually use. So over on the left-hand side here, you have all of the tools that are relevant in development persona, the develop persona, where you are working with raw images. So you've got the view tool, you can zoom in, you've got red eye removal, you've got blemish removal, lots of things in there that are all relevant at this stage. And we'll be using quite a few of those. Obviously not red eye on this one. Over across on the right-hand side, you have other elements that you will interact with when you come to process raw images. And it's not just what you're looking at there. You actually have lots of these panels. You have the histogram. You can look at the scope of the image, the location of it. That one was in London. So I don't actually know if I've got... I don't think I had on that camera way back then any geo information. So I would probably have to add that separately. But if I had, then it would be there. You've got your EXIF information and you've got your focus information. But the ones that we'll be using most when it comes to actually develop a raw image are in the lower right-hand side here. And they are categorised into 5 categories: basic, lens, details, tones and overlays. And I'm going to start off in the basic. You can get quite a lot done actually in there. A couple of other things to show you which really help working with it. The best way to work when you're developing images from RAW is to have a set process and to follow that set process every time you develop a RAW image. And that will really speed up your workflow. The first thing I would do is use these tools in the top right hand corner, which is the first one shows you the clipped highlights, the second one shows you the clipped shadows, and the third one shows you the clipped tones. Now on this image, if I turn that on, you won't see that there is any clipped highlights. There's also very little in the way of clipped shadows. But I have got an image that does have those, so we'll see that when we look at those. But that's the first thing I would do. And then the next thing I would do is start working through this basic studio element over here. Now, just to show you, if I take the exposure of this image all of the way up, you can see it brings back a lot of detail there. You can actually see it's the top of a roof opposite a hotel. That's actually the University of London. In the distance, there is a church, and in the further distance, there was the BT Tower. So by changing the exposure, you can bring back a lot of detail. You'll also notice there, if I zoom in a little bit, there's a lot of noise. That's because it really was past dusk when that was taken. It was the end of October and it was after 5 o'clock from memory, so that's why it's so dark. But I actually want it pretty dark. So if I double click on the slider here, that takes it back to as it was before. I actually need to take that down a bit to take away the detail in that roof. I'm going to take it down too far, but just a little bit further down there. What I will do is change the black point. I'm going to take the black point, so if I show you that by taking it up a long way, what you're doing is adding more black in it. You're moving the black point along that spectrum. And I do want that because I just want this to be a silhouette at the bottom. I don't want any of that detail. And that way I lose a lot of the noise as well. Now I can change the brightness here. So if I take the brightness up, you can see because I've moved the black point, it doesn't actually add in a lot of detail, which is good because that's not what I want. I can also take the brightness down, but the brightness is only affecting the sky element. So I do want that reasonably bright. I just want to change the colour a bit, which is where you come on to the next group of options, which is your enhance. In here you can add contrast, and I do want to add a little bit of contrast to that, so I'll take that up a bit. And I will add a little bit of clarity, and where you would see clarity on an image like this is the details. What's gone on there? I did not want to do that. What have you done? You have moved me right down here, and I did not want you to do that. What I'm trying to do here is zoom in. There we go. You will see the clarity around the edges here. So if I take that clarity all the way down, and then take it all the way up, you can see it's sharpening up around those edges. So best thing I can do here is zoom out and have a look at it, because I don't really need to be zoomed in to that degree to work with the clarity. So that works about right for me. Now, the two that I am very interested in with this image is the saturation, because as I recall that image, there's a lot more colour to it than that. So if I drag that across to the right, it adds saturation, it adds to the colour. So I want to move that across. Unfortunately, as I'm doing that, I've got what look like dark smudges appearing in the top right hand side. So as I zoom in, you can see that. That is either dirt on the sensor, which it could well be, or it could be a bit of a cloud. Hard to tell. I think there was some dirt on the sensor, but I think that was around the middle bit there. But not a problem, we can deal with that and get rid of it. So by adding to the saturation, I've really improved the colour of that. But at this stage, how much have I improved it? And what you don't want to do is find yourself dragging this backwards and forwards and thinking, is that enough? Is it too much? So what you have available from the menu bar at the top here is 3 options. And these 3 options let you split the screen to see the before and the after. So at the moment, we're only looking at the after. We've got no split on it at all. But if I use the middle split, I've got the after on the left and the before on the right, and I can slide that across. It's instant and very, very smooth. So you can actually see that. Another way to use the split is actually to split it so you can completely see the 2 images. You've got the after on the left and the before on the right. So you could use that. I actually prefer the split, so I can see a difference and I can drag it across and see it like that. So I much prefer that one, so I'll leave that there. I do want to add to the vibrance of this as well, because I'm actually taking this well beyond what I would normally do in terms of processing a raw image. Usually I want them to be fairly realistic, but with this one I don't. I want to process it in 2 very completely different ways. And I do want them to be extreme. So I'm really pushing this at this stage. And that's not looking too bad for me there. I've got the blue in the sky. I've got the orange underneath. Yep, that looks okay. So I'm going to turn off my split. And one thing I need is, it's not the greatest composition in the world. So what I'm going to do is use the crop tool, which will bring me my thirds grid. If I want to just size it in any way I choose, then I use that option, and you can see it's not restricting me at all. But if I want to have that in the original ratio, I can change the mode to original ratio, and it forces me, well, it forces that grid to be in a certain size. So if I leave it at that and double click it, then what I've done is lost that building that wasn't adding anything to this on the left hand side, and tidied the image up considerably. Right, last thing to do with this one then is to fix this problem in the top right hand corner, which is blemish really. And what you have here is the blemish removal tool. So if I click on that, this works in rather an odd way. You may imagine that you click and you basically paint over it, but you don't. What I'm going to do is make that much bigger so it covers the whole of that bit there. And I'm going to click and drag. And where I click is where I'm repairing, and where I drag is where I'm taking that from, where I'm taking the good bit from. So I'm going to go over to here and pull that down again. And what I'm doing is placing circles and dragging them and picking up a good bit. And then when I go and get the hand tool, they will disappear and I can have a look at that and see if that's good enough or not. There's a couple of extra elements there. There's a little bit over on the left, there's a tiny bit in the middle, and an even smaller bit in the top corner. What I can do is go in and try and fix that by getting another one of these. So choosing that there and pulling that down. That doesn't look too bad. Getting that bit there and pulling that in from over on the left. Let's have a look at that. Not bad at all. I've only got that little bit there. So we could try and fix that. Go on, I'll try and fix it. Let's pull that one in and pull it from there. That should deal with it. There we go. That's dealt with it. So I've done all of that in RAW, which means I don't have to take this image back and manually adjust it with the pixels once I've developed the image. I've actually developed it in RAW, which is the best way to do it. I could also actually, looking at that, just do one more thing down the bottom, which is lose some of this, what's got like a highlight on it. I can take that out and use it. There's another little one there. Just take away the little white bits that are showing through there so it's more solid at the bottom. Okay, so I've done all that I want to do with that, and then I'm just going to hit the develop button, and that will then take me through, or take that image through to Affinity Photo. It will go back to the photo persona, which gives you all of your tools on the left hand side, and it gives you a different range of tools on the right hand side to carry on working with. So that's one processing of this image. But what I actually want to do is process it again. So I'm going to go in and go to open again, and this time choose that image again. Let's open that up. Because it's open, it's not letting me do that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a save as. All right, so save as, and I will save that out as processed 1, so 001, and save that out to there. Close that one down. And let's go back in and open it up again. Recent one, we want that one. Having a think about it, there we go. So I'm back to my original image. And this is just really to show you that you can take a raw image and you can process it very, very differently. In this circumstance, I'm going to develop it with a much warmer option. And I'm also going to do an extra thing when I've done it to save time in the future. We love things that save time. So I'm going to adjust the exposure so you can see it. Yep, it's got all that detail in it. Take that down. Move the black point up, which was exactly what I did before, and then add to the brightness in the top half of that. So that's about right. I will add a little bit more contrast. I'll also add the clarity back that we had. You should by this point be thinking, I wonder if there's a way to save all this, because you've already done it once. And there is. We'll look at that. So I'm going to up that saturation again, but this time I don't really want it blue, which is quite cool. I want it much warmer. So I will add to the saturation and I will add to the vibrance. But I will also go in and I'll put a tick in white balance. So you've got 3 extra options down here in the panel, collections of settings that we've not even looked at, which is the white balance, the shadows and highlights, and profiles. And I'm going to turn on the white balance, which will give me 2 extra options for temperature and tint. And I want to warm it up. Now, if I take it to the left, it cools it right down. So if I wanted a much more vibrant blue sky, I would take it to the left and cool it down. I actually want to lose the blue and make it orange. So warm it up considerably. Yes, nuclear winter and beyond, I think. I could have gone a little crazy up here with the saturation. Let's take that down a little bit. But there you go. That one is developed. It's much different than the other one. I do want a crop on that, and I'll make it the original ratio. And I will just crop out that building on the left-hand side. I'm not going to take the time, because we've got lots more demos to see, and fix the little bit in the top right-hand corner. But what I will show you is when you've gone through this process, and I took more than one image of this skyline. That was looking out towards the right, and I took another one looking out towards the left. And I might want them both processed in exactly the same way. And that's where your presets come in, over on the right. Now, it's a default preset, which, as the name implies, is the default. But once I've created a configuration of settings, I can actually save that by adding a preset. So if I call this one Warm Skyline and save it, that won't make any changes to this image at all. It will just save the settings into Affinity Photo. I'll then develop this image, and I will do a save as in here. So save as, and I will save that as _002. There we go. So that one's saved. And then I'll close that image. Now, what I'm going to do now is to go back and open up a new image. Different image entirely. So here's hoping I can find the right one. That's not the right one. That's the right one. So this was exactly the same location, looking in a different direction. So I'm going to open that up. That will also open in the develop persona. Oh, this image is even worse than the other one, isn't it? If I change the exposure, not only can you see the roof of the opposite building, you can actually see me in there looking like a ghost, which is in this lower area here. That's me holding the camera. I actually took it through a closed window. What can I say? It was October, it was cold. Didn't fancy opening it. Plus the fact I think I was on the 13th floor, so I didn't fancy that either. So it's not a problem, because we don't want to see that, so we can take that right away and we can start adjusting it. But we've already done all this once. Right, now you'll notice in the preset it says Warm Skyline, but that's not the Warm Skyline that we set up before. I've found that it retains the name of the preset, but it doesn't actually load the preset in. If I go back to default, it will go back to the default. If I then go back and choose Warm Skyline, it gives me the settings that I saved to Warm Skyline, which is a good starting point for me. Obviously, this image is slightly different. So yeah, when I turn on the white balance, you can see it automatically loads that in. That's more what I was looking for. Now, what it doesn't save with that preset is it didn't save my repairs on the right-hand side, and it didn't save the crop, obviously, because it wouldn't make much sense for this image. And in this image, I will go in and I will crop out that building that was opposite that was really in my way. There we go. So I've saved those settings and reapplied them to a different image. So that's processing raw images, all of which we did look at on the iPad. And most of this we did on the iPad as well. So if you're on the iPad, there is a video on YouTube. So just do a quick search on my channel and you will find that. But that is how you do it on the desktop, and then develop, and it will take you back into the photo persona. And I will do a save of that one as well. I will tag a 1 on there. Right, so that was it for that one. Now I really do need to insist with my computer here that it actually lets me see my files, because I need to get my next one up. So I am swiftly going to my desktop so I can see my files. Okay, the next one that we've got is, I will go to File Open, and I am going to open a different image. And this one is my owl image, which is an image that I use quite a lot when I'm demonstrating exposure corrections. It's a popular one with people who follow me on YouTube. It's a good image, but it's a little bit murky. So it's a sharp enough image. It's a good image in terms of the composition, etc. But it's not fantastic in terms of the colours. So what I need to do with this is to apply some adjustments to it. So I'm going to go up to Layer, and I'm going to choose from there New Adjustment Layer. And you have all of these options available for the adjustments in here. Now, the first one I'm going to look at is the levels, because when I look at that image, it all looks very murky. So if I turn on that levels adjustment, you can actually see the histogram. Now, if you're not sure how a histogram works, it shows you the pixels that are in this image, and it shows you how spread out they are, what density of that colour of pixel. So if you think of it as a spectrum going from left to right, you can see that on the left-hand side, that's where the black pixels would be. And the right-hand side is where the white pixels are. You can see from that histogram, I wouldn't even need to see the image to know by looking at that histogram that there are no truly black pixels in this image and there are no truly white pixels. That histogram tells me that. If that was much more evenly spread, so I had a sort of spread maybe like that, in middling in height, but going all the way from left to right, then there would be a good spread of colours in the image. But this one is all bunched up in the middle, and that's why it looks a little bit murky. So it's a really easy fix. All we need to do is to tell it that these pixels here, which are just above that RGB there, they are the darkest pixels in this image. So they are the nearest we've got to black. And at the other end here, so just showing you that there, where that histogram slopes down on the right, they are the lightest pixels in the image, so they should be white. And how you do that is by using these sliders at the bottom. You grab the slider and pull it across, and as you do, you instantly see that image darkening up. Because what you've said to it is, find the darkest pixels and make those black, make them darker. And if we do the opposite of that, which is find the white pixels, the lightest pixels, and lighten them up, then it does that as well, and we've now got a much better spread. It's a narrower spread, but it's a much better spread for that particular image. So I've applied a levels adjustment to that there. What I tend to do next when I'm working with images like this is also add a different type of adjustment. So to go back up to layers and down to adjustment layer. And what I'm looking for in here is a curves adjustment. This also shows you the histogram, and it's exactly the same histogram. We've now stretched it across, so we've got all of those pixels. And generally speaking, with most images, unless you're looking for something completely way out like this, you know, you want something very strange, so you're pulling it right the way out, I find a gentle S curve actually tends to add to an image. So I literally pull it down on the left, up on the right, and it adds a little bit of punch to the image. So I can turn that off. You can see it before. It's very subtle, that change. The other change, so if I turn them off, that was what we started with. The change with the levels was much more significant. The curves is a little bit gentler, but it does add to it. What I demonstrated when I did this example on the iPad was if you want something far more intense than that, you can easily just duplicate the layer. So I'm just Command and C, Command and V, and I've duplicated that layer. You can do that in there, where you copy and paste, or you can duplicate, and the shortcut for that is Command and J. Obviously, that is far too much, unless you are trying to knock the background out. If you're looking for something pretty spectacular, that wouldn't look bad, but it's probably a little bit too much. But if I turn it off, it starts to look a little bit murky again. So what you could do is just change the opacity of that. So maybe put 50% on that copy of it and then turn that on. So very, very simple to change the exposure in Affinity Photo. And if you use adjustment layers, You're not affecting the original pixels, so it's a non-destructive edit that you've got there. So that was our owl. Let's save our owl. Now, because this was a JPEG and I've added adjustments to it, for those adjustments to remain editable and non-destructive, rather than saving the document as a JPEG, I need to do a save as and save it as an Affinity file. So I'm going to save it there like that. Okay, and we've still got that behind there. Can't remember if we saved that or not. I think we did. Yep, so I'll close that one down as well. Right, let's go and get another file to work with. So file open, not the owl now, going back up to the data, and we're going to go into Haze Removal, which was a wow on the iPad. Really amazing. It was a complete wow. So I'm going to use Command and J to make sure I can go back there. Now, Haze Removal, when you look at this image, it was probably shot either early in the morning or early in the evening. Probably the morning looking at it. And it is very, very murky, very misty. It's a great image, nice composition. There would be some great colours in there, some blues and oranges. You've also got this gentleman down here, and you can see there that he's in a blue jacket with a red apron on it. But it's all a little bit murky. And that's what you've got if we go up to Filters. In Filters, there is a dedicated filter called Haze Removal. So I'm going to enable that, and that gives us this dialog at the bottom here. Now, it's having a think about it. It's quite an intensive thing, so it took a few seconds to have a think about it, and it has made some changes. So straight away, it's like, whoa, where were we? What did it look like? Well, those options we had for split on the menu bar have disappeared, but they have appeared down in this dialog box here. So they do exactly the same as they did in that raw develop view. It is the split view. So I'm going to go for the middle one, and I get my slider so I can see how it was and how it is, and I can see there is already a huge improvement to that. Now, what that improvement looks like depends on the interaction of three elements here, which is the distance, the strength, and the exposure correction. The distance refers to how far, so if I bring this back, how far into the distance this actually applies. So if I take it up here, we start to see that we get better colour at the front, but not quite so much in the distance over there. But as I bring that up, you bring the sky into it, and it looks a lot more punchy, a lot better in terms of the colour, and you've kind of taken away the misty look of it. If you look at the birds that you've got here, which are very tiny, they look like little specks, but when you look at the after, it's much more obvious that they are actually birds. So it's brought back a lot of the detail. The second one here is the strength of it. So if you wanted it to apply about 75% of the image, but not that strong, you can dial back on the strength. Or you can go completely the other way and really crank it up in terms of strength. Be warned if you do that though. Let's just zoom into that image. And if you're wondering how I'm doing the zooming, I'm holding the Option key down and I'm using a Magic Mouse 2. So I'm using the push up and push down with that. And you can see it gets very, very noisy. I pull that back, not too much noise before, very, very noisy now. If you want to add that much colour to it, you may need to work in different techniques to lose the noisiness of it. So I don't think we'll add that much to it. We'll add a fair amount. And then you've got the exposure correction, which is you can take it down so it's sort of more underexposed, or you can take it all the way up if you want it lighter. So really personal preference there. I think around there is not too bad, or maybe a little bit darker. So we can see a big difference. So there we go, we have got the haze removal. So I'm going to apply that. That has actually applied to the pixels, and that's why I have an extra layer. That's why I duplicated that layer before we started, so I can see the before and the after, and it is non-destructive because I have kept my original pixels, although it was destructive to the second layer that I created. But it's a very, very powerful filter, and it's a very easy filter to use with only those three elements to manipulate. You can, of course, then take that much further if you want to. What you could do is look at using a blend mode, for example. So you could get a whole different look by multiplying it or colour burning it. So you may decide to have a look at the other things that you could do with that. And some of these are not helpful at all, are they? Like that one, for instance. But, you know, maybe you could find a use for that. But yeah, though you have options there. So that filter is only the start of what you can do. It's really correcting an image and then letting you take it further if you want to. So again, I will do a save as on there, and I will save that, and I will put that in my folder and then close it down. Going back to the file open. I should have put this in the sidebar, shouldn't I? Right, now, one of our favourite demonstrations here, fixing things. In this case, measles. I'm going to show you a couple of tools. I have a preference here, that I must admit, but I will show you the other way first. Now, what I'm going to do is, this will paint pixels. What we're going to do is the repair tools, and they will paint pixels. So I am going to give them a new layer, which if I turn off the old layer, there's nothing on it. It's a completely transparent layer. And I'm going to give it that layer, and I'm going to call those repairs. This is what I do when I am actually working on an image. I always have a layer in it called repairs. And what I want to do is to fix it on that second layer. Otherwise, it's destructive to my original image. And I may want to go back to my original image. You never know. Probably not with this one, but you never know. So I'm going to put my repairs on there. Now, by comparison to the iPad version, which is where we first saw this demonstration, on the iPad version, there were dedicated modes to extra things like selections and things. But I demonstrated the inpainting tool. But what I'm going to do in here is show you that you actually have 5 tools in here, and you have all of these on the iPad as well. But I'm going to start with the healing brush tool, which doesn't take the inpainting tool. The inpainting brush is fantastic, and I much prefer it, I'll be honest. But the healing brush tool is one of the traditional tools. It's been around longer, so you may want to know how that one works. So I'm going to start with that one. Now, a couple of things to think about. The circle that you've got is the size of the brush. So I'm using the square bracket keys to make that much smaller or to make that bigger. Now, that will work on virtually any tool. So get it to the right size before we start. And then zooming, so that's where I'm going to be working. Now, at the moment, it's not going to do anything because as I'm pushing this over the top of it, you can just see the spots all the way through it. Even if I click, it's not doing anything. Now, it's telling me that I've got to click. In fact, it's telling me I've got to option click to pick up some pixels to paint with. So what we need is a good bit of skin, which is like that bit there. Hold the option key down and you'll see that I get a change there. And when I click, it puts a black cross on it. And it picks up those pixels. So as I'm moving round, I should technically see the pixels it's picked up. If you're with me live in the chat, you can tell me why it's not showing me any pixels that I should have picked up. I'll let you think about that for a couple of seconds. But the reason that it isn't, there is a valid reason, and it gets me every time, and I wish I could change the default, but I've not found a way yet. The reason it's not actually picked up any pixels, I'm in the right place, but up on our tools options up here, just under the menu bar, you'll see it says current layer. And if you look across at my layers, my current layer is transparent. So it's picked up the pixels all right, but there are actually no pixels. So what I need to do is to change that to current layer and below. So it's exactly the same on the iPad version of Affinity Photo, it's just in a different location, down the bottom of the screen. Right, so now I need to go back, and you'll see now as I move, it has actually picked up some pixels. Now it's got them from where that cross is, but it's got them on all the layers. It has actually picked some up. And as I start painting with that, you can see where it's coming from and you can see where it's going to. And as I move over there, it's going to do the same thing. But you'll notice it's picking the pixels from a fixed location, where that black cross is, which might work. It has done for those two, but it might not if you're working somewhere down here. So there is an issue with that, and that is this option at the top there, which says aligned. If I put a tick in there, as I move across, it's going to make it from where I am. So if I go from there, it's going to move it. And if I move over here, it's relative to it. It moves with it. It's pulling it in from the right-hand side of that. Now, if I try that up there, that's not going to work. It needs to really be pulling it from there. So it's really an issue with this tool of finding a good bit to use to paint with. And that's why, for many beginners, you might be intimidated by that, thinking, no, it just looks strange. I'm getting patterns and I'm not sure where to copy from. And in that case there, where I've just done that from, there's a little bit of a blemish on the skin and it's picked that up, and now I've got 2 of them, and maybe you don't want that. So that's something to think about with that particular tool. That's why I'm going to show you another tool, my favourite tool. Oh, I think it's my favourite in the entire application, which is the in-painting brush tool. Now, the in-painting brush works in a slightly different way. So I'm going to zoom in there so we can see it. The difference between this and the one we've just seen is I don't need to tell it where to take the pixels from. I'm going to leave it to work that out. But you'll notice that we still have this current layer business at the top. That's the thing that always throws me. I'm in there and I'm painting, and it's just going to take it from the current layer, which is my repairs layer. It doesn't have all of the pixels. So always make sure that you go and choose the layer and below. And I'm using the same keys, which is the square bracket keys, to make the brush smaller, and then I'm just going to paint onto it, paint over the top of that. I'll get rid of those spots there, and that little bit of a scratch there, and then working with the rest of it. And you can see the difference this time is, if it's not perfect the first time, just paint over it. And as I go up there, I don't have to worry about where that's coming from. It will deal with that. Affinity Photo will deal with that, and I won't have to think about it. So I must admit, I really like the in-painting tool when it comes to repairing, because it gives me a lot less to think about. I can just look at it and make a judgment as to what I want to repair and in what way I want to repair it. If I find that it's not done a great job, I can undo it and do it again. Or because it's on a layer of its own, I can just use the eraser tool and get rid of it. If you want to see that, I had a scratch over here. I'm going to get the erase tool, and I'm on my repairs layer. And as I hover over that, you can see what will happen if I paint that out. So if I paint out my repair, it will actually take it back. Now I'm going to undo that because I actually liked my repair, but you can do that because you've got them on a separate layer. So just to show you what you've actually got with that. That's what you've actually repaired. Those are the pixels you've painted on, and because they're over the top of the original image, it's working as a repair. And there's one bit there that's going to annoy me, which is that bit there, that little bit there. And I need to make that a little bit smaller and make sure that I've got the correct tool, which is my in-painting tool, and just work over that. That's a little bit trickier as there's eyebrows involved, but it's done a very good job with it. So there we go with that. So there's the before and there's the after with two tools. And we had the, let's go back into here, we had the healing brush tool and we had the in-painting brush tool. You've also got the blemish removal and the patch tool, which are a slight variation on a theme. All of these tools are repair tools. So horses for courses depends on what you're trying to repair and in what way. But my clear favourite is the in-painting brush tool. Right, so let's save that image. There we go. And go and get another image. So in and open. And this time, oh, it was my UPS van. Love this one. Because I always say when I'm demonstrating these things, it's all very well when you're repairing something that is, you know, an image that obviously lends itself to being repaired. There was a lot of good skin in that last one to use as the repair. But this image is a real image. It was just snapped on my iPhone as the UPS man was in the back trying to find my iMac. And I was hyperventilating that he wouldn't, but he did. I'm using it now, so he clearly did. And when I looked at it, I thought, well, that's great. You know, just stick it on Facebook, stick it on Twitter. But look at these lampposts, honestly. What's the council thinking? It looks like a listening device. It actually looks like GCHQ, doesn't it? So that was a bit of an issue for me. And I thought, well, I'll try and get rid of them. How difficult can it be? So for this one, I'm going to use my favourite, which is the in-painting brush tool. Now, because I've gone into a new image, I need to resize the brush. But I also need to remember, because I've added my repairs layer, which I haven't named, and I should. That's very naughty of me. Repairs, always name your layers. I've got to remember to go in and choose current layer and below. Otherwise, I'll be painting and nothing will be happening. Now, all I need to do with this is to draw around it. The trick in getting a good removal of an object is getting all of the object and enough of the pixels around it so Affinity Photo can make a good calculation as to what it is you're trying to get rid of. If you don't select enough, you will get ghosting. That was a perfect selection. It has completely gone. Just to show you, that was the before, that's the after. Now, I then got carried away. Let's see what else I can get rid of, because I spotted that I had what looked like an aerial, but I think it's a tree. So a little tree branch there, let's get rid of that. More of a tree branch there, let's get rid of that. Oh, and let's get rid of this while we're there. So I'm covering a little bit of the roof, because what I would like it to do is make sure that it leaves me with a straight line. And you see, I didn't actually get enough of that there. That's why it's a little bit ghosted. But I have now, and it's got rid of. I will also get rid of this bit here. So let's draw around that, making sure I've got all of the middle of it. And there we go. Has a good old think about it and gets rid of it. If anything left, just go over it again, little by little. I did take all of that out, I think. I redesigned their roof. I think I did that with it and got rid of it. So it looks like just a little bit of a chimney. Right, much neater. Oh, and then I spotted, hang on, wrong key. There we go, in we go. I then spotted we have an aerial. So let's lose the aerial. I've got far too much time on my hands, haven't I? All this for a Twitter picture. There we go, I got rid of that. But then we've got the biggie, which is this lamppost, which helpfully is in UPS colours, but not helpfully is cutting my image right in half. So with this one, a little bit trickier. Should be all right at the top, but I need that much bigger. Now I'm going to try and do this in one by just drawing down it. Just drawing down it from the top down to the roof of the van and see how we get on with that. How good it is going to depend on your selection and how many passes you make. That one, not bad at all. That's pretty much got rid of the top of that. And I might want to get rid of that branch as well while we're at it. See how that's not the best. I need to zoom into that really to do that justice. So I'm covering a little bit less of the image, but in a more intense way. There we go. And you can see I have got a little bit of ghosting. Didn't look like it when I was zoomed out, but when I'm zoomed in, it does. So I would get rid of that as well. Which leaves us with the second half of the lamppost. It's now blending in beautifully, but we still have it in the way. So let's try and get rid of that. So making my brush a little bit bigger again. And again, trick is making a selection that is wide enough that it knows what to replace it with. And what I really want it to replace it with is the van behind it that it can't see. So let's get rid of the top half of that. Let's see what it does with that. Not too bad, but you'll see it has developed another problem. And the problem that it's developed is it's taken the rivets, including that little dot there, which shouldn't be there at all, but we'll fix that shortly. We'll get rid of the rest of the lamppost first. So going in there, moving down over the bushes at the bottom, taking that up so it's got enough selected to make a good calculation and get rid of it. Not bad, not bad. Its rivets aren't in the right place. It's duplicated the rivets. I will get rid of those rivets totally. That's what I'll do. So what I'm going to do now is just go over that, just down the rivets, and it will lose the rivets. Take the rivets down there, lose that one, and I'm done. I think I've got a slight little bit of ghosting at the bottom, but nothing to worry about. And I now don't have a lamppost. What I do have is I do have extra rivets there, and all I'm going to do with these is lose the little white spots. Just drawing over them and just drawing a line down those rivets. And that could be a straighter line, couldn't it? This is what comes of using a mouse. Because I'm spoilt rotten now. Now I've got a pencil on an iPad. There we go. Right. Not a bad go at all. So let's have a look at the before and the after. There's the before and there's the after. And then I got really ambitious, which was I decided one satellite dish was enough for anyone. And I worked around that. Wondering what it would replace it with, apart from brickwork. I didn't know how accurate the brickwork would be. But actually, it wasn't bad at all. I smoothed the edges down a little bit. And when I zoomed out, it literally was as though it had never been there. And I do think on the iPad, if you've seen the iPad demonstration, I did fix the roof a bit while I was at it. There we go. So yeah, because there's a pattern on the roof, it did a great job. It understood that pattern enough to fix those very easily. I'm not making a great selection or anything. I'm literally just going in there and it's doing a fantastic job. Can highly recommend that. Fantastic job. Okay, so that was that one. Let's save that one while we're at it as well. So that's what it looks like on a real image. That is not me cheating with one of these sanitized images that always works well in a demonstration. That was a real one that I worked with. So I will close that one down. Yeah, you can go as well. Let's go and get another image, which was the trickiest one. The trickiest one. This was the beach swing. I saw this image as I was looking for demonstration images and I thought, bet there's no way I can get rid of that because it's pretty much the majority of the image. But it would make a lovely vista if I could. And that was my challenge. So again, I need a new blank layer for the repairs. So name that repairs. And then I need my in-painting tool. and I need to start working on that image. You'll notice that in the last image, it had a circle. And this time it's got this little crosshair, and that's because it's not big enough. As I'm making that brush bigger, you can see it then actually goes back to a circle. So I'm going to do the easy bit first, which is draw down the top bit there. Let's see, get rid of that. And it didn't work at all because, again, it's caught me. I need to choose current layer and below. Oh, I do wish I could make that the default. I never want the current layer. And if I did, I'd remember to do it. Right, there we go. That bit's gone. Fantastic. I can do that bit there next. You'll notice I'm doing the easy bits. Just a line. Now that bit, a little bit more complicated. Right, I'm going to zoom into it and I'm going to make my brush smaller, not bigger. That way I can get in and get a better selection around it. So again, the trick is to make sure that you've got enough of a selection that it can make a distinction between what it is you're trying to get rid of and the background. So a little bit more there on that side. That shouldn't be bad at all. It should have enough there. It might be a little bit of ghosting, which there is. But that's the price I pay for trying to keep the detail in that cloud, because I don't want it to look, when I've finished, that I've taken anything away. Otherwise, there would be no point, would there? So zooming in a bit, I can see I've got a little fraction of ghosting there. So I'm just going over it exactly the same again. Tiny little bit there, and zoom out to the whole thing. If you're wondering how I'm zooming out to the whole thing, that's Command and 0 on my keyboard. Right, that's one side gone. Let's attempt to get rid of the other side before we come back and have a look at the seat. So just drawing over that bit there. A little bit either side. Hopefully that's enough for it. Not too bad at all. Just a tiny little bit there. Right, and now I need to get rid of this bit at the top. That's going to be fairly straightforward, that bit. And then I've got this bit. So I think I would make my brush a little bit smaller, and I would go into it and manually make a go round there, rather than just putting a blob on top of it, really. I'm actually going in there and I'm drawing around it in a specific shape. I could get a much bigger brush and just sort of dob it on it once, but it wouldn't make as good a selection if I do that. So I actually made that smaller and it's gone in one. Right, Command and 0. That leaves us with the seat. Oh, a tricky bit, because there are actually footprints on there behind it. So what I did with this was, I did this example on the iPad and I took it very slowly. I did it little by little. What I'm going to endeavour to do in here is go about it in one go. Let's try getting rid of it in one go. So I'm drawing around the bits that are hanging off the bottom, getting the seat and enough of the sand behind it so it knows it's the seat I'm attempting to remove, making sure I've got the knot at the bottom and then the 2 ropes at the top there. Think that's pretty reasonable. If I haven't got enough, that's when I will get that ghosting. But that doesn't look like a bad selection. And then just release the mouse. Well, let's see how it goes. Excellent. Absolutely excellent. No ghosting at all. Right, let's zoom out and see. I think we had one more thing, which is this shadow down the bottom there, which I'm not sure is from that seat or not, but whether it is or not, it's going. So I'm going to draw over that. So it looks like an elephant's trunk intruding on my photo, which I can't have at all. Right, there we go. So that's the after. There was the before, and this time it was the majority of the image that I was trying to remove. Again, this image was not taken with that in mind. It was just me looking at sample images and thinking, I wonder if I can get rid of that. I do like a challenge. And I did manage to get rid of that completely. So there's the before and there is the after. And you'll see that you've got great detail in the sky and no indication that there was anything there at all. So just scrolling up to that. Oh, I see ghosting. Now I can see that on my screen, not too sure if you're going to see that in the broadcast, but it was there, so I've got rid of it. There we go. So they were the tricky ones, the very, very tricky ones. So let's get rid of that. Right, moving on. Another area that people absolutely love. You all tell me that you love these, don't open a recent one, I want to open one. You all tell me that you love these kind of images, which is making selections and compositing. I don't want the beach swing, I want Charlie the camel. Right, I've got 2 images here. The first one is Charlie. Charlie the camel. Right, Charlie, beautiful image, great sky, fantastic. Not much of interest in the background though, it's just a sky. So what I'm going to do with Charlie is make a selection of him. All right, on the one hand, it's not a tricky selection because it's against a plain sky. But on the other hand, it's a very tricky selection because he's got a lot of fur. And in his fur, if I selected round it, I'd be seeing lots of blue that I would find very difficult to select. We look at this bit here. Absolutely diabolical to try and make a selection of that. But I'm going to give it a go. So the first tool that I'm going to use for that is the selection brush tool. And I've got two options here. I can either attempt to select Charlie, or I can just select the sky and then inverse it. I'm going to go and try and select Charlie. Now there is good contrast between Charlie and the background in terms of him being brown. It's when you start getting to the edges that it starts getting a bit dicey. So you can see down here already at the bottom it's selected far too much. And however good my selection is around his shoulders, it's not going to be great around the fur there. So I'll just zoom in so you can actually see it. That's a terrible, terrible selection. Not much I can do about that though. Now this little bit down here is more concerning because I definitely don't want that blue bit selected. Now, as I make a selection, it adds to my selection. So just to show you that, if I were to select more blue, it adds to my selection. It doesn't select it instead, it adds to it. And that's because I have an option turned on at the top here, which is the mode. You have an add mode and a subtract mode. And it's on the add mode. So what I need to do is to click the subtract mode and then go back down and go over the blue bit to subtract it. And of course you can see it's not great this. Now it's lost some of the brown. What I'm going to do is make my brush smaller and I'm in the add mode and then just draw back on the brown. And that's as good as my selection is going to get. It's not the best, but it's as good as it's going to get. What I need to do now is to refine the selection. And you do that with the refine button at the top. So I'm going to click that and that takes you into the refine selection dialog box, which is this dialog box here. Now you can see just how bad when it puts this ruby overlay on the top of it, just how bad that selection would be if I tried to use that to composite an image. And that is, it's got lots of blue around the edge there. And if I go out again and we go back into the top, just on his neck, that is shockingly bad. There's lots of fur missing and there's lots of blue behind that too. So coming out of that. Right. So how does the refine selection tool work? Well, you have in here a preview, and at the moment it's previewed against an overlay, which is the ruby overlay. You can also see that selection against black. You can see it against white. And you can see it against black and white, which is my favourite. That actually shows you the selection. And transparent. Okay, so that's what you've got there. And you can see how bad the selection is. If I put that against black, so there's a real contrast, and I zoom in, you can see how bad that is. So that's what we're trying to avoid, and that's what the refined selection is for. So in here, what I need to do with it is to make my brush around the right size, which is enough so it covers part of what you do want and part of what you don't want. So in that respect, it's fairly similar to what we've already been doing. So drawing over that. And that has actually refined that selection around the edge. It's not obvious from this point that it's actually done it, but it has. So I'm going to draw over that bit there. And I'm trying to include all of the blue. Trying to include that. I'm trying to make sure down here as well that that's right. I don't want it to take too much. Have you taken too much? You might have taken a smidgen too much, but we'll check that. It's not a bad selection. And now this one is much better now than this little bit up here, because you can see in this one with the ruby overlay, there now isn't much blue at all, but there is in this one, and there's missing fur. So I'll go down there and just do that bit, making sure I've got all the fur I want to keep in it, and a little bit of where the blue is. Now this bit round here, not too bad at all. It's done a fairly good job on that automatically. There's a little bit there that might improve it. It might improve it, might not. Got to be careful I don't take too much away. So I'm avoiding areas that I want I don't want to change. And going in there like that. So hopefully that's got some of his eyelashes. Let's go up there, add that little bit of fur back in. So up here I'm trying to keep the fur. I am mindful of it losing the blue, which is good, but it's the fur I'm trying to keep that I'm interested in as well. Right, I'm going to make the brush a little bit bigger here because this bit is terrible. This is the worst bit. This is the most complicated bit to work with. So I'm going over it. I'm making sure I've got every little bit of fur I want to keep selected, painted over, and some of the fur that has the blue in it. So going over that, letting it have a good old think about that. That's a much better selection. Then coming down to there, and then going just over the edge. Now, that might be a little bit of a too big a brush. Let's see how it does. It does okay. That's okay. Make it a little bit smaller there as I finish off going along his back, which it hasn't made a bad job of that selection already. I'm really just trying to finesse it. So over the edges there. Now, one thing that's different from the iPad version is this interface does not automatically get out of the way. So sometimes I'm stopping because the interface is in the way and I need to stop to work around it. And have we got everything down there? I do think we have. There we go. Yep, that looks okay. Now, to make sure that that looks okay, let's have a look at that selection now. Straight away you can see a lot less blue. If I go into the black one, no blue at all. It's done a brilliant job at that selection. Let's go into the white. Fantastic. And my favourite, the black and white. And you can just see when you zoom in just how intricate that selection is. I couldn't do that if I had forever without refining the selection. No matter what selection tools I used, you would struggle with that. And you've also got transparent. So let's have a look at it on transparent. Brilliant. Now, that's doing it. That's doing it, looking at it. Now we need to do something with it. And the something that I need to do with it is output it. And your output options are at the bottom of the Refine Selection dialog. And you have 4 options. You can output as a selection. You can output as a mask, as a new layer, or a new layer with a mask. So you have those 4 options. If you output it as a selection, you then have to go in and manually do something with that selection. If you output it as a mask, it will mask the existing layer. And if you output it as a new layer, it will output just the pixels that are Charlie. So I find the best way is a new layer with the mask. And that way I can edit it and finesse it later if I need to when I put the image that I'm going to put behind it, actually behind it. So I'm going to apply that. Now, it's turned off this background layer, but that's still there. And what's happened in here is I've got those pixels and I've got a mask over the top of it, and that's hiding the edges. So that means I've got my perfect selection. Now, I need to place an image because I want something behind Charlie. So I'm going to back into my Charlie the Camel folder, and I've got this image here of Egypt. So I'm going to go into there. What that does is actually load that image into my cursor. So if you can just see that, and I can't zoom into my cursor because my cursor disappears, but it's a little arrow and there's a circle with a down pointing arrow pointing down to it. And I'm going to click and draw that out. And that means I can get it just the right size without having to go in and rescale anything. So perfect, there we go. So just hanging off the edge a little bit, that is perfect. It's on the wrong side of my camel, so I'm going to put it behind my camel. And how I did that was Command and square bracket. Command and right square bracket takes it up, left square bracket takes it down. So now it is behind my camel. My camel is a little bit too high, so I'm going to move my camel down, so it's down there. The problem I've got with this image now is, though, that camel is not that distinct from the background. Because the colours are similar, it's not great. If I could do something with the background, that would be perfect. So I'm going to go down to my image, and I am going to go to, I want a live filter layer. And in my live filter, I'm going to go for a lens blur. So I'm going to go into my lens blur, and not much to see at the moment. Doesn't look like it's done anything at all. And that's because the radius is set to 0. As I start bringing that radius up, what we should see happening in the background is that the Egyptian figures blur out. I can take that all the way up to completely blurred. Not much point taking it that far. You then can't see that not really much point in having it there. But if I take it back so you've got a little bit of detail that you can see that it's sarcophagus or something like that, a pyramid. But it's blurred enough to not distract from Charlie. We can't have Charlie distracted from. So I shall leave that about there. Okay. Now, the reason that I did that by going into layer and live filter layer was that remains editable. So this layer that we've got over here on the right hand side is my background image, but you'll see now it's got a disclosure triangle. And as I open that disclosure triangle, you can see that I have lens blur on there. And if I'm in just the right spot and I double click on that, it will open up my lens blur, and I can retrospectively change it. So I can make it not as blurred, or I can make it more blurred, which is fantastic. We love that. That is brilliant. So non-destructive in the extreme. There you go. So we started off with Charlie. Let's turn that on so you can see those. We started off with that, and we ended up with a completely different image by making a fantastic selection. Okay, I'm going to save that file as well. Save that one. Now, my next image caused me untold misery when I last did a live demo. So, we can all play the Jeopardy music now. What went wrong with it was I downloaded it from iCloud, and it didn't like it, basically. It did all kinds of things. Come on, open up that folder. Let's go into the Mayor in the Office folder. There he is. This is another image which was never taken for this kind of work. It was taken in 2002. It's my office in 2002, believe it or not. Look at that computer. Oh, the shame of it. Not only is it a Windows PC, but it's a 14-inch monitor. An old tube monitor. Oh, dear, dear me. Right, so it was just a quick snap that I took of my dog. It was taken in a JPEG format. It was taken on an old Fuji camera. And I saw this as I was thinking about making selections and thought, I wonder. And then I caught myself thinking, you're insane. But I decided I'd give it a go anyway. So what I'm after doing is blurring the background a bit, because who's interested in my MCS ebooks from all those years ago? I know I'm not anymore. So I want to blur out the background and keep the dog sharp. So I need to make a selection. So I'm going to get my brush tool, my selection tool. And I'm going to make a very rough selection. I can't do any more than a very rough selection with this one. Okay, now what went wrong last time was it took one on itself. I think it's the best explanation I've got for that. Hopefully it won't take one on itself this time, but let's see. Got to love live demos. They've got to be real, haven't they? They've got to be real demos. Right, okay, so I've got my selection, my very rough selection, and I'm going to go in and refine that selection. Again, I get my Ruby overlay. I can quickly whip through my options, and you can see that's actually the kind of selection that I would have made of my dog back in 2002. That was as good as it got. Should have got a less furry dog, but he was adorable. So you need to improve that, is what we're up to. So we need to improve the selection of that. So I'm going to make this a bigger brush. Now, one thing with this image is I should actually have an image of him wet, and then you'd realise just how skinny he is, that most of that was fur. So it would look odd if I took this back to here. Right? You might think, why are you going any further? But actually, that is all fur. His fur used to stick out about 4 to 5 inches from his body. So it does need to be a fairly wide selection here. So I definitely need the bits I want to keep. And what I'm looking for, how I decide how far back to take it, is how much sort of dark or grey I can see in it. And it will make a difference with the selection. But there you go. That looks pretty good. So I'm going to go around the top here and get the edge of his ear. His ears were solid. And they were always up like radar dishes as well, especially when the fridge was opened, strangely. Right, now I'm going to stop there because the interface is in my way, and let it strut its stuff with that. And move the interface and move the image. You can actually see there where it's finished making that selection. It goes back to being a very rough selection. So let's go down there. Now I can see with his fur there, it's more solid, that bit of fur. So it's really the left-hand side I've got more problems with that. He's also turned sideways a bit. And that bit down there, I'm never quite sure with that what's what. I think it's him. Right, so I've got a much better selection now. But it's this bit here. He is actually, that fur is more like a lion where the fur's sticking out from the side of his head. So actually he is quite skinny under there, and all of that area where it's sticking out, that's just fur, that's not body, hence the selection needing to go quite a way back into the body. Right, let's have a look at that against a black mat. And that's a much better selection, much better selection. So look at it against white. Now you can see why it looks a little bit strange. It looks like his head's stuck on him from here, but that really is just that fur. It's just the fur that's making it look like that. That is a good selection. And you can tell from that just how good the selection is. That's definitely a silhouette of my boy. And that's it on transparent. Right, so let's go back to the overlay. Again, I want my output to be a new layer with a mask, and apply that. And that gives me my selection. What I was actually trying to do was blur that background. So I'm going to duplicate my background, and the only reason that I'm doing that is for a reason that if I blur it, I need to have it overhanging the edges a little bit. In fact, I'll leave it there to show you why. I'll leave it there and show you why. So I'm overhanging on two edges, but not the other edge. And I need to go in and apply. I need my layer, a filter layer, and I need to go down to my lens blur. And I need to up my blur. So are you blurring here? You are blurring. There's the background going into blur. So that's not too bad at all. Now you should be able to see what my problem is and why I made an extra layer. Because I want my original layer as non-destructive. So I want those pixels there. But what's happened at this stage, and I can actually apply that. That's absolutely fine. I can always go in and edit it. But in the top right-hand corner, it's absolutely fine. But down here, it looks like I've got transparent pixels. And that's because I've blurred it and my edges have become blurred. So how I fix that is go in and get the select tool over there and just stretch that out a little bit. And I'm actually on the wrong layer. I need to be selecting out, it's in here, my background. I need to select that there and just stretch it out a tiny bit. That's all I need to do with it. And now we have a blurred background and we have an in-focus dog. If I turn off the in-focus dog, you can see the out-of-focus dog. And actually, I think I would probably make that a little bit more blurred. Probably about that level there. So this time, jeopardy over, the dog worked fine. Good lad, Mayor, good lad. So I'm going to save him into there. And one final demo. So taking about the same time as we took last time with the iPad version, which is going into open an image. And I am into my last one, which is the graveyard one. Don't play ball, are you? Jumping about. Right, there we go. And I am after this one, which is a demonstration that I've done before. I covered this back in 2015, and what I was concerned about the first time I demonstrated it was getting her to composite nicely with the background. So I added all kinds of adjustment layers and things. What I'm concerned about this time is getting a very good selection. When I say a good selection, all will become apparent. What I'm going to do with this one is, it's easier to actually select the grey background here because that's more of a solid colour. So I'm not worrying too much about the edges. I'd like the selection to be reasonable. And from memory, it's not even reasonable. It loses quite a lot in the translation, including her arm. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to inverse that selection and let's see what we've got selected. Well, for a start, I need her arm selected, so I'll select that there. We've also got a lot of the hat missing and the hair selection isn't great at all. So you can see how bad the hair selection is, and there's a lot of the hat missing, including the feather. So what I do at this stage is just improve that selection by going around the edges, because I should be able to get a fairly good selection of the hat. I'm a little bit less optimistic about the feather, but I should get a reasonable selection of the hat. But I don't have to be 100% precise. What I have done with this in the past is get a very small brush and literally make the selection of it, but I can't get quite to the edges. Another thing is I need to select that bit there, and as I select that, it selects the grey bit in the middle. So if I hold the Option key down, it will actually take away from my selection, so I can go in and do that, but you can see just how fiddly this is. I've also got the whole of this bit selected, so I need to go in and deal with that. So this one is actually quite a fiddly selection, even though it looks easy. There's a couple of edges that are very tricky. But there you go, that's not bad. I'd need to take that away. And I'd need to add that bit. looking good so far. But the hair isn't good. So that's why I need to use the refine selection. And when I go in here, you can see the selection around her dress is absolutely fine. I do not want to be fiddling with that, because if I do, it will make the edge worse, not better. That edge is fairly solid and I can leave it alone. I do have a bit around her neck here that I might need to deal with, but mainly it's the hair that's causing the problem here. So what I need to do with that is draw around the hair, making sure I get all of the bits I want to keep and all of the bits in her hair that are showing the grey background. So all of that bit there, that bit showing grey through it, that bit showing grey, I need to go out and select that. So that looks pretty decent so far. There we go. And I now need to go up here and make the rest of that selection. Yep, that's got all of that. A little bit there, I think. There we go. Now, the edge of the hat needs selecting. So I need to go in and make sure I've got the edge of the hat around there, because I know I've got a little bit selected there that I shouldn't have, and vice versa. Need to be thinking about that. Also need to be thinking about this feather, because to get that better than I can get it, I'm just going to go over the whole thing there and make sure that it's done a reasonable job with that. It should find that fairly easy, certainly easier than I would. And there's a little bit there as well I need to be thinking about. Right, so I've got a selection. I'm just going to have a look at that selection in my black and white. And there's my selection. But after the first time I did this, I realised that if you zoom into the hat, it's a sort of pinkish colour. But it's actually got holes in it. And you can see the grey background. Not through all of it, but certainly through certain bits of it, you can see that background. So I started thinking, I wonder, I really should stop myself. I wonder if I could actually get rid of some of the pixels actually in the hat. So around there sort of thing. And if you look at that, you can now start to see the ruby overlay. So I'm at this stage thinking, I wonder if that would make that semi-transparent. I don't like it when I wonder. It's dangerous when I wonder. So I can see the rest of it is pinkish. So that's the hat. But there were definite bits there where I thought I could see through it. So I did that with it. That might actually be enough. But let's go round that bit too. So I've done the whole of the inside of that hat. And now let's have a look at the black and white. And you can see that I have actually now got the holes selected, which was nothing short of amazing. So going back into the overlay. Right, looking at the whole of that, and let's accept that that's a reasonable selection. It's not bad at all. So I'm going to output that selection as a new layer with the mask. Apply that in there and I have a selection. So let's have a look at that selection. And it's fantastic around the hair. The dress hasn't disappeared. We've even got that hair that sticks out there. So that is an amazing selection. And if I zoom into that bit, you can see you can actually see the white pixels showing through. So far so good. Next thing to do is to place a file. Placing a file takes another file, in this case the gravestones that were behind her, and allows you to place it into this file. So I'm going to open that, and I'm going to click this time, show you the difference between drawing it out and clicking. So I've clicked. It's mighty big. So I'm using Command and minus to zoom out, and that blue frame that you see, that's the image. So I'm going to squish that down. So it's about the right size. It's going to be a little bit big. It's going to be all right height-wise, but I'm going to just move it slightly so we can see the raven. And then Command and 0, and I've zoomed back into the whole thing. Same problem that we had with the camel, in terms of it's put the placed image on top of the layer stack, and it needs to be behind it. So Command and left bracket, if you're following along, to move that backwards. And there we go. Now, what I'm going to do is grab hold of the lady here and move her down, because what I want to do is show you that we've got a fantastic selection around the hair. You can definitely see that. There's the gravestone behind. But if I go upwards and I put her on the top of the raven, you can actually see the raven through her hat. So as I'm moving her, you can actually see the raven through her hat. There's his little beady eye. So that one to me was a very difficult one to make a selection of. not only in terms of the hair, which is the holy grail of making selections, but also in terms of semi-transparent materials, which in this case it's a hat, but a lot of the time it's a wedding veil. So the most difficult selection. And that's it for the demos. So I'm going to head back into my presentation and do a quick recap. So the first thing we looked at was raw images, and not only did we develop a sort of a cross thing, we did a dual process of images. So same original source image in two different ways, but also saved the settings so we could apply them to other images. Then we looked at the haze removal, which has the potential to make a massive difference to an image, although be very careful, it will bring in posterization of the colours, which you may then have to remove in a different way. But you can certainly salvage images and make them look the way you probably thought they looked when you took them. Then we looked at repairing images. So we used the first of the tools on the blemish removal, and then we went on to much bigger things, and we got rid of the swing with the in-painting tool. Then we went on to compositing in terms of we needed to make selections, and we needed to make good selections. So the first one we looked at was Charlie. We then did Maya, but I haven't got a slide of Maya. But we have got the lady with the raven and the hat. So those are the examples that we looked at tonight. One quick thing, which is only going to be relevant if you're watching this very soon after it was broadcast, which is if you're working cross-platform with your iPad, there is a beta version of Affinity Photo that you may need, which I did because I had a file off my iPad. I took it back to my Mac and it couldn't open it. It had elements in it that were new to the file format. So I'll make sure that the link is in there for that so you can get hold of that. If you're looking for more tutorials, you will find official Affinity tutorials on Vimeo. And there's a whole range of those on there on Vimeo. There is also a session dedicated to Affinity Photo for Mac that I delivered when it was brand new in September 2015, as I mentioned at the beginning. So that's available there too. We did do a couple of the same examples as I did tonight. One of them was the lady with the hat, and as I say, we did it in a completely different way. So tonight we were looking at making a very intricate selection. Last time it was just, can we select the hair? So that's worth going to have a look at, I would say. Right, so I have been Elaine Giles. You can find me all over the internet as Elaine Giles. I would love to hear from you. I'd love to hear what you're using Affinity for. Are you using Affinity Designer as well? Because I love Affinity Designer. I probably use it more than Photo, but I love the pair of them. So you can find me on Twitter, LinkedIn, Facebook, Google+, and on YouTube, where you will find my other training. But right now I'm going to head off into Q&A. If you are watching this later and you have any questions, either add a comment or contact me. I would love to hear from you. Until then, I will see you next time.